Welcome, everybody, to episode 5 of the Safehouse Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Andy. It's great to be here. My dad, Pastor Bob, executive director and founder of Safehouse, is with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to keep telling some stories today, and we're going to shift focus from just some stories today, too. We talked about a couple days ago. Also with us in the studio, as always, is Brandon. What's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, not too much. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Good. We're getting ready to... I can't believe we're at 5 of these already.
It's like we just started last week.
I know.
Like,
it's gone really fast. We got some exciting updates, and we had teased them last week, I think, and we got an announcement at the end of the episode today about some new things that are going to be happening we're excited about. So
yeah, I'm excited to get them announced.
Yeah. So what we're going to do today...
We're actually going to announce...
We're going... Not the whole thing. You don't even know exactly how it's going to go, so you just got to roll with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know what we're going to announce.
You know what we're going to do. You just don't know exactly how deep...
We've just been teasing it forever.
We're going to announce everything. Yeah.
I mean, at what point does people,
not even care anymore?
It's like, they're going to be holding signs out in front of the building just like they are. Give me my freedom right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's something. Yeah. We're going to get into some things today. That's funny you mentioned that. Last week we talked about the challenge that we talked about was for you to consider who your champions were and the people that made an impact in your life or that challenged you or that they put you on their shoulders, something that happened that they did or said or some role they played that, pushed you further along. And we got great feedback from that. We're excited about it. And we want you to continue to be challenged by what we talk about. The stories that we tell, we're not just telling so we can talk and fill air. We want these... The first 4 weeks, and I think we got maybe 1 or 2 more weeks worth of just kind of breaking down the history of the company and kind of how we got to where we are. The purpose of that from day one has always been to just illustrate that this vision has been through the ringer, and we've earned it because of the fire, and fire purifies things, and we're sharpened, and some other analogies that sometimes sound cliche but they're true is that because the vision has been put through such a rigorous testing period, it's been solidified and it's deep in our hearts, and it's when it works really well, and when it doesn't work, we learn from it and we grow. And so what we're going to do this week is we're going to share another one of what you've been calling just the disruptions, the things that have kind of thrown things off of their normal pattern, their normal course.
Yeah, I think in the past what we've done
further things.
When we've talked about disruptions, it's been bad things that's happened that disrupted the focus of what we're moving forward, and what forced us to go in different directions. This is a little different disruption. This was a disruption of something, was an opportunity that came our way that I really wasn't interested in, and really was pushed back. I was pushing back on it, but it was one of those things that the door was barely cracked open, and so we pushed through, and it came about for us. And then we didn't even know why it happened until a year and a half later on why this this position that we was put in.
Yeah. So to give everybody, to give you kind of a recap, Safehouse was an after-school program. That's how it started within the confines of a church. You've heard these stories. You can go back to other episodes and listen to the detailed stories of that. But through the time, it became a residential facility. We were in an old hospital in Warren, which we haven't talked about that transition from getting there and then from there to that. That's a different story, maybe for today, maybe for another time. But we were in that old hospital in Warren. We transitioned to a new the new building.
The newer,
it was
older
a new
hospital.
building. It was still an old hospital in
Youngstown. The new
Youngstown.
old hospital, yeah.
And then from there, we went into great detail in the first episode of going from that location in Youngstown to where we currently are.
Right.
And so the disruption, even the positive, the transition of today's story falls right in the gap kind of in between that second hospital, like the second location we were in.
Correct.
And then the current place that we're in right now. So while we were still in that hospital before the landlord said, you got to get out.
Things were running
good. We had good plans.
Yeah.
We had
good leadership in place.
Leadership. We had gone through a bunch of transitions in leadership at that point. You talking about building it, from the bottom up or from the top down, and just the different ways that you have to get the right personnel in place. And so today, this story that we're talking about, this transition that happened while we were still in that building and things were rolling, which is why when the opportunity presented itself, it wasn't really something to deeply consider.
No.
So we're in the studio that we're in right now is in a church building in the Coatesville, Ohio area, which is, if you're not from this area, it's Youngstown. It's basically right kind of on the cusp of
east side
of Youngstown, northeast Ohio. And the Camel and Boardman, and there's a couple like kind of metro areas that are all suburbs of Youngstown all around us. And there was a church building that used to be a Presbyterian church, and that was empty forever, right? For a while.
Well,
they had empty for a while.
They had 6 people that were attending it, and then I think the summer that they approached us, they had quit having services in it because it was too hot, and they basically had decided to sell it.
So why did they approach you? Why?
Well, let's rewind
to the beginning?
a little bit.
Okay.
About probably 3 weeks before that, things at the residential was doing really good. I was kind of we had rebuilt the management team from the top down. I think this was the 3rd time that we would have rebuilt it, in fact, we still have that management team still today.
And this is after the potential coup takeover that we talked about last week, I believe it was.
And then there was
another transition
which we
after
haven't talked about,
which is a different story.
Right.
We're not really doing these chronologically as much as we're doing them in how we've learned from them, I guess. And so we are in the middle of we're in the back end of a 3rd shift in management.
Right.
Which
was a bad shift.
We're in the 2nd building of the residential that we've been in. The after school program at this point had been dissolved. The Safehouse after school program at this point had been dissolved, and Refuge was born. Refuge was in existence. And so Safehouse is the Sunday morning stuff that we were doing for a while. We're not doing at this point anymore. A little bit on occasion, because we use that one building a little bit for some Sunday morning stuff every now and then. But there wasn't a normal regular church thing happening. And so all of our focus was on residential as far as Safehouse goes.
Right.
So that's kind of the picture of where we're at.
And things were going smoothly. We were, we had the team put together for a period of time, and things were good all around, financially, business-wise, ministry-wise. We were having a lot of success. Mm-hmm. And I got a little itchy, I guess, to do something. As you and Courtney always say, and Angie, is that I've got to stay busy or I get bored. And that's usually when we build buildings. But I was getting itchy because it was running smoothly. And Angie came up to me, I don't know, it was an evening during the week, and she said, I think you need to get back in the podium. And I'm like, what? And she goes, yeah, I think you need to get back in the podium. I think you need to start preaching again. And I looked at her and I said, well, I'm not interested in going through renting hotel buildings and starting a church up and doing all that stuff. I said, been there, done that.
There was a period where we rented a banquet hall in a hotel.
Set up, tore down every week.
With a mobile church setup.
Yeah.
And we'd go there every week and set it up. I'd completely forgotten about that.
Yeah. And I told her, I said, and kind of was flippant about it a little bit with her. And I said, I just made this statement. I said, if God wanted me back, if God wants me back in the podium, he's going to have to hand me a church. And I just kind of walked away and didn't think anything about it. And Angie made the statement as I was walking away. She goes, well, I'm going to pray about it. I said, okay. So about 3 weeks later, I was talking to a guy that I had bought a boat from. And it just so happens he was a distant member of the church. And he said, hey, do you want a church building? And I thought he was joking at first. And I said, yeah, right. And he goes, no, I'm serious. He said, do you want a church building? He said, there's a nice building up the road here that used to be my church. And he said, I think you could get it for a good price. And I said, I'm really not interested in it at all. So I went back, mentioned it to Angie, and she was like, I think you ought to look into it. You could start your own service again. And again, it's like, I'm not so sure that's what my calling is right now. I'm not so sure that that's what I'm supposed to do. We just come through these disruptions. Things were kind of settled down. It was like, I really don't want, more on my table. And I said, they'd have to give it to us. I said, I'm not going in debt for it at all. And basically blew it off. And so got a phone call from an individual I never met that had talked to this guy at the boat shop. And he said, would you meet with us? There's 6 of us that are left in the church. Would you meet with us for us to discuss the purchasing of the church building to you. And I said, I'm really not interested in it. And I said, I'm not going to offend you. I said, we don't have a lot of cash on hand. I'm not going to gobble it up on a building that I'm not so sure what I would do with.
Right.
And so he hung up, was a nice ending to the conversation. And then I think it was a day later, he said, would you meet with the 6 of us? He called me back. And I said, okay, I'll go meet. So I came in, looked at the building. They had moved basically everything out into this main area of the church and had a bunch of stuff for sale. And so I went through, looked at some of the stuff they had for sale. And we're having a meeting tonight. He said, would you come by the meeting? And I said, I'm really, I don't see what this could be used for right now. And he said, well, if you had the building, what would you do with it? And I said, well, we probably would use it for, I said, your backfield, you got 4 acres of land. At that time, we didn't have any grassy area for the residential. I said, I probably would clean that up and we'd have kids play ball and we'd use this
because the facility that we were in as a residential was an old hospital without any
lots.
land around
Correct.
it except what was used for parking lots.
I said, well, I could use it for like a day programming if we wanted to. And he would go, would you have a church service in it? I said, I don't know. I said, it all depends, how many people we could get to come. Maybe I would have a church service on Sunday morning. And he said, would you please come and talk to the people? So I went to the meeting. They drilled me on, who we were and what we was doing. And again, this was about 6 people that were left in basically there's a cemetery across the street and most of the congregation is over there.
Right.
That had just died off over the years. And they couldn't afford the building and there was some problems with the heating system. And so long story short was, I excused myself from the meeting and said, they asked me, said, would you give us a price? And I said, I'm not going to insult you because I said, it's not worth that much to me. The building isn't. And for what we would be using for I was going to have to rework the building and the property to basically come within the vision of Safehouse. Yeah, the property would work, but it's about a 15-minute drive. It's not perfect. And I said, I said, I'm not going to offend you guys because I was going to lowball them.
Right.
They wanted like $240,000 for the building or something like that. And I was going to lowball them. I mean, I was going to lowball them big time. And I was like, I'm not going to do it to you at all. And, so I turned around and, went out to the truck. And one of the guys followed me out to the truck and he said, would you please come back in? And I said, I said, your people, they're too nice. I'm not going to insult them.
Right.
And he said, listen, he said, all we're going to do with the money is give it to a charity, whatever we sell the building for. He said, we're not keeping the money. He said, we're giving it to a charity. I said, I'm still not going to lowball him. And he said, come in and offer $5,000. And I went, what?
What?
And he said, offer them $5,000. I said, why would I do that? He said, they just want some kind of money to pass through the hands so all the liability of the building will come off of them. He said, offer them $5,000.
So were they actually asking 240?
Mm-hmm. It was on the market for like 240, 230, something like that.
And they're willing to take.
After they caught the vision of what we were going to do with it, they got excited. And they had another person that had looked at it that was going to give them some money, more money, but he was going to make it like a storage place. And then there was another place that looked at it and he was going to move in a bunch of car parts or something. And they wanted to keep it somewhat in ministry is what they wanted the building to be because they had their whole life invested in here. And there were some problems. The parsonage of the old church was attached to the property and it had never been separated. They had been renting that to someone else on a land contract deal. There was a lot of things that was not done correctly. Right. That was going to be a nightmare as far as getting an attorney involved and separate everything
getting
out.
It cleaned up from a legal standpoint.
And, so I went in and they said, what would you offer us? And I said, I was told to give you $5,000. And they all said, okay. and then the guy looked at me and said, hey, he said, our boiler broke down last week and it's on its last leg. If you would repair the boiler until we can get the closing done, we'll take that off the purchase price. And so I think the boiler repair was like $2,500. And so when I went to pay, we got the boiler fixed, I think the next day or two, and we got heat in the building. And then we went ahead and hired an attorney and was processing the paperwork to separate the two pieces of property. And,
Right.
and all that stuff was done. I think when it was all said and done, I wrote them a check for $1,500. And then they turned around and donated $1,000 of it back to us. So we basically got the building for nothing. Is what we did. Here's the neat thing about the building. In today's economy, you're not going to, not everybody's in the market for a church, so you're going to sell it for whatever anyone would want to offer you to it. But we have it insured for $2.4 million. That's what the building's worth through insurance. That would be replacement cost. And
because you didn't put, we put money into it to update it, but it wasn't anywhere near that.
No, we put about $100,000 because we completely refaced the inside of the building, all aspects of it. It had been let go for 20 years, 15 years, just on a very minimum amount of money. Put a new roof on it. We've basically, they had this old lean-to porch. It was off the back of it. We put a new ramp in there. And the whole time we were doing it, we were planning to open up, have services, and then let the kids play in the backfield.
We did Sunday morning services for a while in here.
For a few months. There was a few of them that came, and there was a few others that came. And then I just felt like people, it never really grew, but we never really pushed it to grow.
Yeah.
We just was like, we're going to be open. If you want to come.
Right.
I preached a little bit at that time. Didn't expand it. I mean, we didn't really put energy into it. We showed up on Sunday morning. Whoever was here, we would preach, have a small service, and then we would, dismiss them. Most of the money that they wanted to bring into it, we just donated it to a charity. We didn't keep the offering. And but the whole time that we were getting the building ready and putting money into it, I kept telling my administrator, TJ, I said, there's just something inside that we're to get the building ready.
Yeah.
That were to just get the building ready, and not knowing of what was going to be coming. But when we finally had the last disruption before we moved into the new campus,
right.
We used this building exclusively for about 14 months every day through the building project until we got our main administration building built.
What, to give people, like a visual, the church it's a big building. When you come in, there's like a chapel area, there's like a kitchen, there's like a sanctuary, there's some like what maybe were used as offices or classrooms for Sunday school or whatever. There's a big old basement that's downstairs.
Full basement.
And then there's like this like it was a garage, basically like a storage garage that's off the side. And so
we'll show pictures of it.
We got into this space when things were going fine. Right? We got into this space. And when I mentioned the studio that we're in right now, the studio that, if you're watching YouTube, the studio is inside of this church. Okay. We're in this little side office that we've converted into this space, and it's used exclusively for what this room is used exclusively for the podcast. And so when we went through that big disruption that kind of launched the current state of Safehouse, the current season of Safehouse, things were going smoothly. We obtained this building.
Right.
And then things went south, right? The story that we told in the first episode about the landlord, we were going down to vacation. You could check back to episode 1 if you want to recap that. But so we had to have the only space that we had guaranteed at that point was the land that was undeveloped.
Correct.
Right. And this building.
Right. And
that
now keep in mind, you need day programming because we didn't have the main building where we could do school or anything like that. We didn't even have a kitchen. At the main campus when we opened. We only opened 4 houses.
4 houses. And so we had, if you recall, we had that 3 or 4 month, it turned into about 5 months with some like help from the courts or whatever window to build the buildings from groundbreaking all the way up. And all we had time for was the 4 houses. So for day programming, office space for case managers, administration, all the people that needed spaces to work, excuse me, was going to come from another space.
Right.
Enter this building that we didn't want or think we needed. And then it was presented to us in this way. And so we took advantage of it. We updated it. And then it was at least 14 months. I mean, because it felt like it was longer.
Yeah.
Because it took a long time.
The whole time we were preparing for it to become the lifeboat of Safehouse.
Right.
It really became the ark because it during the daytime, we would bring all the residents and the staff over to this building, and we ran our schools here. We had our
groups.
offices here. Our therapy happened here.
Our receptionist worked from here. She had to hold down the fort, like, from both places. Brandon, this was before you came on board.
When you guys were working out of the church?
Yeah, like, because you came on board, what, 6 months ago now?
Yeah, it was in November is when I was technically
So we had
hired.
just
I got
finished
my office in December.
We had just finished building the big gym building a couple months before that.
Yeah.
And so, like, Lynn, our receptionist, who's terrific, she held down the fort from this room.
This room used to be Lynn's office, right?
Yeah, we're in right now. And so it's not even on the same campus as the main place.
No, but the neat thing about it, it's a mile and a half away from the main campus. Now let's think about this. Before we even knew there was a main campus, we were given this building that we didn't know what we were going to use it for nothing.
Right.
And I was told in my head and in my mind, and what I felt was a mandate by God was to get it ready. And I didn't know what it was to get ready for. It was just, we went through the whole building and we basically rebuilt it, remodeled it from the bottom up is what we ended up doing. All new carpeting, all new flooring, updated the bathrooms, updated the kitchen, did everything. And as we were spending the money, everybody's like, well, what are you going to use it for? And I went, I don't know. I just know I'm supposed to get it ready.
Yeah.
Didn't even see on the horizon that we were going to have the problem that we had. But when the problem came up and the question was, well, what are we going to do with the kids during the daytime? It was like, bingo.
Yeah.
God knew the whole time that we were going to need this building for day programming until we could get our main campus completely 100% done. I mean, we didn't have enough room, so we brought in, I think at one time, didn't we have 3 temporary trailers in the parking lot for offices?
Yeah, we had 2 for an extended period of time.
But we started with 3.
For that first period of time, we had 3. And the case managers were working out of there. Then they moved into that back garage area.
Right.
That's on this property and where the church is. And then
we converted the garage into be 3 office, a conference room, and a big area.
Well, before even that, we converted the garage to be what was like kind of a sub idea of what the original Safehouse after school program was.
Right.
We had put TVs in there with video game systems, and we had talked about if anything were to happen from the refuge standpoint, like this space could be available, because at this point we had the building that refuge is in. So what's interesting though is that before the adversity even happened, things were lined up in place to help us get through it when the adversity did come.
Yeah, not even knowing that he had prepped us for the adversity before we knew the adversity was even going to be on the horizon.
I bring that up because that's something we're going to come back to in a little bit, about the point of like the leadership lesson that we learned through this idea is that sometimes like you're getting prepped for adversity before the adversity ever comes. And what separates you getting through the adversity sometimes is recognizing the opportunity to prep for said adversity before the adversity actually happens, right?
Clarify that. That's a little confusing to me.
So what I mean by that is, go ahead, Brandon.
Failure to prepare is to prepare to fail.
Yeah. So like when you look at leadership or vision, and we've talked a lot about vision over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and you talk about, anything from leading your family to leading a small business to leading a ministry, is that it's easy to get comfortable when things are going well because it's like, oh, we've overcome whatever to get to this point, and so now we have to maintain, right? Or now we have to manage, and now things are flowing. But the inevitable truth is that adversity is coming again at some point, right? You're going to face some sort of adversity again,
right? And
the trick is during those peak times, right, is to look for the opportunities to prepare for the valley times. Right. Because if you are unprepared for the valley times, that will inevitably come. When you get into them, those peak times are they're memories, right?
Years ago, I was asked to go to what was called our international youth camp program for the denomination. I was a teenager, and I remember that during one of the days that we were there, it was in Colorado. And I think this hits perfect with what you're saying. I remember going out on the side of this hill, and I was looking over. You could see Pikes Peak, and it was just gorgeous. And you saw the valley that was in there. And I remember the thought going through my mind that look at Pikes Peak. And so I looked up at Pikes Peak. It had a little bit of snow on it, but it's just a big rock. There's nothing that grows on top of it. And then I looked in the valley. It was in the fall. And I could see some farmers that were working some fields and stuff. And this thought went through my mind. Nothing grows on the mountaintop. It only grows in the valley.
Right.
And I think it's key for what we go through at different times is that we want this mountaintop experience in life. But you don't grow on the mountaintop experiences. At least I haven't. Well, maybe I haven't figured out how to do that yet. But the mountaintop experiences are, you're in this, just incredible things are going well, and it's when you get into the rough time of the valley and the darkness of the valley, and you see all this stuff that's surrounding you, the mountains that are surrounding you. It's really at that point that you figure out who you're going to hold on to and what you're going to hold on to. And so the valley, I believe the valley times prepare you for the mountain time, but I don't think you can live on the mountain and the
mountain is not sustainable for growth.
No.
It's the air's too thin, right? There's no like, it's not possible for things to actually sustain long-term growth and life on a mountaintop. I mean, there's some things that can, but it's not where it happens, right? And even the things that thrive on you could watch Earth documentaries, and the things that live on mountains, the animals climb down to get their sustenance, to give them what they need when they're up on them. Like, it's just the way that the world works. And it's true of vision. It's true of leadership. It's true of families, is that the stuff that gets us to the peak, that gives us the energy and the motivation and the sustainability to get to the peak, is the stuff we experience when we're in the valley.
Right.
It's the stuff that we absorb or consume or learn about in the valleys. And there's a quote. Let me read you a quote that just kind of brings us around. I don't want to hear your thought. Billy Graham said that comfort and prosperity have never enriched the world as much as adversity has. And when you think of adversity, you always think of it in the negative. You think of it as this bad thing, and it's uncomfortable. There's discomfort, and it's not always good, right? I mean, the adversity that we've experienced, if we could pick it, we would not have picked it. And then there's adversity that comes because of bad decisions that you make, right? That are your fault, for example, that could have been avoided if you would have been wiser or had listened to advice or counsel or whatever. But then there's adversity that happens that you have no control over.
Right.
And it's in that adversity where you have an opportunity to let it pull you back or hold you back, or grow from it and learn from it and get the things that are going to sustain you as you climb the next peak. And
do you think that failure, no matter how large or small it is, will kind of direct us or gets a path to the valley?
Gets us
if you fail, or if you're failing to make right decisions, will that automatically send you down the road to a valley?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's going to send you into a valley, but it's what you do with that is going to determine whether it serves you or holds you back.
So the question I want to ask, which I'm not so sure there's an answer, is does every valley have failures that we need to learn from?
I don't know that you're in a valley exclusively because of a failure. I think that failures can lead you to valleys that you can learn from. But I don't think every valley is a result of a failure.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because there's ebbs and flows, there's, like, for example, there are
before you go on.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Reason why I say that is because failure's not bad. Failure's not bad if you learn off of it.
Right.
The question is not when are we going to fail? The question is when we're going to fail.
Right.
As human beings, we're going to make bad decisions. One of the things that I'm excited about doing these podcasts is that for the first time in 30 years, I get to tell my side of the story.
Yeah.
Now, it's from my perspective, and there's still probably people out there going to say, that's not the way it happened, or that's not the way it worked, because it's coming from their perspective.
Right.
But from my perspective, this is my story. This is how I've been through. But I realized that over the course of my years of doing things, failure's not bad if you learn off of it. If you don't learn off of it, you're going to repeat the failure.
Well, and that's my whole point, is that adversity gives us an opportunity, right? And that opportunity is to learn from it or to not.
Right.
Right? Because the failures will repeat themselves until you learn from it. John Maxwell, we've quoted him before, but he has a quote that he says that experience is not the best teacher. right? Everybody's like, well, experience is the best teacher, and sometimes you can only learn if you fail. And while that's true, failure itself is not the best teacher. Experience itself is not the best teacher. He adds a word to it. He says that evaluated experience is the best teacher.
Right.
And what he means by that is when you experience failure or you experience success, what you learn from it is what you choose to apply to your own self to grow is what is the best teacher. Because you can experience a lot and not learn anything.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because you're choosing to not learn from it. And then there's other opportunities where failure in and of itself is neither good nor bad. What you do with it determines whether it's positive or negative, right?
Yeah.
And so when we experience failure, we will be faced with this choice. And this choice is, do I learn from this? Do I admit the failure? Do I apply the lessons that it can teach me? And do I move forward? Or do I blame other people? Do I give up? Do I stop? Right? Or do I keep going, banging my head like a fly on a window or a bee on a window that sees the light, right? But can't get out because it doesn't realize that it's banging its head against a glass pane, right?
Right.
There's an experiment, and I feel like we're going on all kinds of different tangents, but I love this idea. There's an experiment where if you take a gnat and you put it, do you know about this, Brandon, where you put a gnat in a jar, okay? And you put a lid over top that jar, the gnat, I don't know if it's exactly a gnat, it might be a flea or it's some sort of bug, and it will jump, right? And it will hit its head over the top of the thing.
Right.
Eventually, it'll stop jumping at the point where the lid is, to the point where you can take the lid off and it will never jump out of the jar.
Because it doesn't want to feel the pain.
Because it has experienced pain. Another interesting social experiment that was done was with monkeys and bananas. Have you heard about this one? Do you know about this? They put a bushel of bananas at the top of a pole. And we're talking about failure and lessons and learning and experience, okay? And this is just the way that people are. But they use this example with monkeys, and they put a bunch of monkeys, 3, 4, 5 monkeys in a pen or whatever. They put a bushel of bananas at the top of this pole, and every time a monkey would climb, they would spray that monkey with water, and it would scurry down the pole, and it wouldn't do it. And so they just did this over a time to where the learned behavior was that if they climbed the pole, they were going to get sprayed, right? And then they took one at a time, they took a monkey that had been sprayed out and replaced it with a monkey that had never been sprayed. The monkey that had never been sprayed would go to climb the pole. All the other monkeys would pull him down. Don't do that. Right. Don't go up there. Something bad's going to happen to you. And then they continue to replace monkeys that had been sprayed with monkeys that had not. But the monkeys that had never been sprayed had been conditioned to believe that if you climb that pole, something bad's going to happen. And they did this over the course of time to the point where no monkey would let any other monkey climb that pole to get to those bushels, even though they had replaced all the monkeys that had been sprayed with monkeys that had not been sprayed.
So what's that tell us?
And so what it tells us is that when you are we are conditioned, we learn, right, from the things that happen to us and happen to other people. Okay. And so they didn't ever try. And anytime they would try, they would get pulled down by others who had been pulled down by others who had experienced something bad. And so the point of that is the same thing of the evaluated experience, right? When we experience something that's negative, we have an opportunity to essentially put a helmet on and keep going, right?
Right.
Or to let it keep us down. And then it affects the people that we have influence with as leaders, right? As parents, as business owners, as whatever we're doing. We can't allow the negative experiences that we go through to keep us from climbing the pole again. Right. Because if we do, then we are missing out on the bananas, and the analogy kind of falls apart at some point. You can't stretch it too far, but the point, it matters that the peak, you have to climb the peak to get to the peak. You don't just appear there. No one drops you from a helicopter, right? You have to work to get there. And then when you get there, in order to sustain any of that growth, you have to get back down into the valley to get the tools that you need to get back up to the peak again. And the beautiful thing about leadership and vision is that it seems to plateau at a certain point where your success hits a peak, right? And then the next valley can feel like it's a deeper valley than the one before it, but then the next peak is higher. Right. And so you experience a little success and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this big of a valley to come next. And then the peak comes and you're like, wow, this is better than I ever imagined. And then the next valley comes and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're going to go through this. But over the course, the timeline of your life, when you look back, you're like, we never would have thought that we would, first of all, experience the pain and difficulty that we've experienced. We also never would have guessed that we would be experiencing the level of impact that we have.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's just us, and we're just
I think
waking up trying to do it right every day. We didn't set out for this.
No, I think if you look at the stories in the past that we've told, that monkey effect is there, where people would say you can't do this or you shouldn't do this based off of the fears of their failure, or fears of failure. One of the things that I've learned a long time ago, which comes out of the book that John Maxwell writes, which is Failing Forward. A great book if you want to read it about failure. You can tell
who's influenced our leadership over
absolutely.
The course of our lives.
But he made a statement. He said, if you're going to fall when you fail, you might as well pick something up while you're down there before you get back up. And what I got off of that was the fact that when we fail, it's there for us to learn and to evaluate what we've learned and to put it in to move forward. The failure of the bookstore was not a failure if I've learned off of it of what I didn't know back then on cash flow that I know now on cash flow.
Right.
And so I'm constantly going back and looking at my notes and saying, what did I learn off of this and how did I learn off of this? Not even knowing that when we purchased the church, God had already set us up that this building would become the answer to our daily problem, our daily programming problem, before I even knew that we were going to have a daily program problem.
Right.
And so when you looking at your life and you understand that, and you might say, well, I failed at this and I failed at that. There's so many people in the world that'll quit trying. We talk about price because they don't want to experience failure again, or it's become personal. I'm stupid. I'm an idiot. Most people don't fail. One of the things I learned a long time ago is this statement, practice makes perfect. No, it doesn't. Practice makes permanent, is what it does. And if you practice something wrong, incorrectly, it's still wrong.
You're going to just do it incorrectly all the time.
It's a fact that you've got to practice correctly so that practice becomes permanent, muscle memory, whatever you want to talk. You can put it in any analogy that you want to put it in. But practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So if I'm not throwing a strike, I'm going to make an adjustment.
Right. And if you don't, and you keep practicing, then you're going to be an expert at throwing non-strikes.
Correct. Right. Is what you end up being. And so failure, I mean, look at it in just baseball. We're talking about analogies. A good baseball hitter in the pros hits 300.
Yeah. Can you imagine being 30%, having a 30% success rate makes you the best in your field? That would be awesome.
But it's true.
But it's true because that's how hard it is to hit a baseball. But it just goes to show, like,
7 times out of 10 it goes up
strike
to the
out,
plate,
or
he does not get on base.
Right.
Okay. But yet we look at our life and we say, well, we failed in this, and before you know it, we just cancel everything because we failed, or someone looks and says, you're a failure. And I remember people in my life early on, not a lot, but there was 2 or 3 people would say, why in the world would you want to hang around with Bobby Denon? He's nothing but a failure. He's not going to make anything out of his life. Why would you want to stay around him? And I remember an individual that said that didn't know I was in the building when they said that. And it rattled me.
You've shared this story with the kids at Safehouse.
It rattled me to the point that was like, you know what? I thought she cared more about me than what she did. And here this is her true opinion. Who I could have let that statement bury me. Why in the world would you want to hang around with Bobby Denon? He's from the east side of Cambridge. He's never going to amount nothing to anything in his life. And I remember in the midst of trial and tribulations that was a driving force to me, where I would hear that voice of that person say that, why would you want to have anything to do with him? He's never going to become anything. And I'm, maybe I haven't become what that individual thought I should become, but I feel pretty good about what I've become.
You certainly didn't turn out the way they said you would.
And But, go ahead.
I mean, to kind of bounce off that, one thing that I kind of keep close is that even though hate doesn't burn clean, it operates as one heck of a fuel,
Yeah.
Keep you going.
Absolutely.
Keep you wanting to prove them wrong, or, and then the same thing with love. It makes you want to prove them right. Whatever they might say.
Well, and that, again, comes down to how you choose to handle what you're faced with, right?
And let me say this.
Because you could have chosen to believe it. But instead you chose to not believe it, or you eventually just didn't let it get to a point where you had to decide, okay, I'm either going to let this person speak into me or I'm not. But you did that, right? Like their actions and their words didn't determine what path you took, but you could have let it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that we keep coming back to is that choice in adversity is what determines whether the adversity is beneficial or holds you back.
Well, you said a key word a while back was that evaluated experience. If I look at that statement of what you said with hate, and I see hate, if I'm not careful, I will begin to hate myself because of what other people think I am. And I'll let that be my first failure will be, well, they were right.
Yeah, you question whether or not they're accurate.
Right. And so I've got to turn that aggravation, or I don't know if I like the word hate or not, but I have to turn that to a place of where it needs to be, of where it's going to drive me to learn, to evaluate, to move forward on the picture of where I want to be.
Right.
And at that point, success for me was having a job, preparing for the family, making sure we had food on the table and a house over, a roof over our head. And at that particular time, after those words came back, the first driving force that I had was be a good father, be a good husband, be a good provider.
Right.
And that was the driving force that was there, because at times it would be like, and not saying, I mean, I say this to the kids all the time. The number one failure in the room right now is Bob Denon. I've made more mistakes than anyone. I have failed more than anybody has ever failed. We could spend the next 10 years talking about my screw-ups. But what I've decided to do was not to list them as if they were bad things against me, but I've listed them and say, okay, missed it here, won't miss it here. We're going to make this next step because of what I've learned off of here. And yeah, there's collateral damage when you fail. There's always collateral damage when you fail. And part of the price that you pay on vision and moving things forward is always off of that collateral damage. But there's always people that come across your path that won't want you to move forward because of their past fears of their failures that they had. I think that there's a great story in the Bible that talks about someone that really went through adversity.
And we want to transition and tell the story of this person in the Bible. But I want to pivot to it by talking about, like, we're in the middle right now, globally, of huge adversity.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, huge adversity. I mean, something that we have never faced as a society, and most of us probably won't be alive when and if we ever face it again.
Correct.
It's a once in a century.
It's wild
adversity. And of course, we're talking about this global pandemic and the COVID-19 and the virus, and say what you will, and people have varying opinions about, like, the legitimacy of it and whether numbers are accurate, and constitutionality from a domestic issue about how they're handling it, and state by state issues, and everybody's got their opinions. But the truth of the matter is that we are smack dab in the middle, not at the beginning, not at the end. We're right in the thick of the biggest adversity we have ever experienced as a national and global human race, as a society. And
of the industrial,
I mean, of course, there's wars and there's, Holocaust. I mean, there's been terrible things that have happened globally over the course of human life. But this right now is a huge adversity. That's the point that I want to make.
Yeah.
And we have a choice. We have an opportunity here as leaders, as pastors, as parents, as friends. We have a choice to either let this, like, hold us back, right? Or to find something in the middle of it that at some point can serve us and other people, period. Now, that's not to say, Because I have friends that their jobs have been deeply affected by this, and they're angry and they're sad and they're upset. That's fine. I'm angry and sad and upset with them. I'm not saying buck up, like let's, have a positive attitude. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that adversity equals opportunity. And that's it, right? And so we can be angry. We can look at it as something that just is terrible. It sucks. I wish that it wouldn't happen. Those are all true. I'm not minimizing the struggle that people are going with. And I want to be very clear about that, because it's important to understand that if there's grief or depression or sadness in the middle of this, that's fine. I'm not going to say anything about how you shouldn't think that way, and it's all about how you think. This is a terrible situation, and it's you need to walk through the grief.
Right.
But that does not mean that there's not opportunity. Right. And that's the difference between adversity holding you back and adversity moving forward. To give you an example of some stuff that I'm experiencing, I know a lot of pastors, right? And pastors are now talking about whether or not they should do church, gathering in worship like a normal Sunday, right? With people coming in. And so I know a lot of pastors are reaching out to their boards and their elders and their people, and they're saying, if we came back, what would it look like, right? Every business, at least in the state of Ohio, right, for sure, and across the country, is trying to figure out what it looks like when we get back to what is, quote, everybody's using this term, the new normal, which is fine, whatever. Everybody's trying to process it. What's interesting about it, though, is that from day one, I looked at this as a church leader, even though I'm not a pastor of a church, I'm a leader in the church. As a church leader, I run Refuge. These are opportunities for us to connect with people in ways that we've never done before, right? And so now I'm seeing these pastors and some of these church members who are shifting from this opportunity idea to where they're just angry, right? And they're expressing this anger on social media. They're expressing this anger to me personally. They're expressing this anger because I just had a conversation with a pastor who can't believe how angry his people are. So this is a long way around of going. When we cannot as leaders look at this adversity as anything other than an opportunity, because we have a chance to serve people in a way that we have never had before.
Yeah, but the leader's facing something here that we've talked about for the last 4 weeks, and that is the fact that he or she cannot get everybody to agree. And that's really a struggle for a lot of them right now.
And that's a struggle for leadership in general, which again, that adversity is an opportunity. Like
Correct.
You're not going to be able to get me off of this soapbox about adversity being opportunity. That's not to say that you can't call up a friend and say, man, these people are driving me crazy. Like I need to just vent for a minute. This is bugging me. I need to get this out. And then you go and you put your head down and you go to work. Right. The struggle that I'm having and the thing that I'm dealing with is that I have friends that I'm really close with that are handling exactly like that. They're venting to their friends, they're processing it in a healthy way, and then they're going and they're doing, right? And then I have other people that I am associated with or that I have seen that are publicly like asking for support and then publicly like bashing it when they don't get it. And it's like, that's not like turning opportunity into... That's not turning adversity into opportunity.
Like
that's
asking the sheep their opinion, and then when they tell you their opinion, you cut their throats.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And then I saw something. This drives me crazy. And again, I warned everybody that I was close with that this podcast is going to hear my voice a lot more, because like this is the kind of stuff that bothers me about adversity and opportunity and how people process things sometimes. Is that I was on Facebook the other day, which was a mistake probably, and I saw this meme, this picture of. And I told Brandon about this. It was a picture from World War II of Adolf Hitler saluting all of his soldiers. And they had superimposed in Photoshop or whatever a picture of Ohio Governor Mike DeWine over the face of Hitler. And what they were implying was that he was a dictator who was infringing on the constitutional human rights of Ohio citizens. I'm not a constitutional expert. Maybe what he's doing is unconstitutional, but it is nowhere near what Adolf Hitler did.
Right.
And the fact that they're looking at this adversity and they're going, we need somebody to blame, right?
Right.
We're going to compare a man who has publicly done nothing but try to protect the citizens in the state in which he was an elected official, okay? And you could argue whether or not that's his motivation or not. but he's certainly not responsible
Right.
for the death of an entire religious belief, heritage, culture group of people.
Right.
And when we as leaders and influencers, if we slip into this blame thing, right? When we're faced with adversity, we miss out on all kinds of potential opportunities for the peak to happen.
Right.
Right? We get stuck in the valley. We gorge ourselves on the stuff that's in the valley, and we don't ever get to the next plateau, right? We don't ever get to the next peak. And so what I want to do is I want to take all of this for the next couple minutes. We got about 10 minutes or so before we try to wrap up, and we can go long, whatever. But the story in the Bible that really resonates with me when it comes to adversity and overcoming is the story of Joseph. And it's in the latter part of the book of Genesis. Joseph was a boy born in a huge family. His father had 12 other sons. He was one of 12 or 13 brothers, and he was the favorite of the family. Right? He was one of the youngest, and his dad liked him better than everybody else, which is probably not great, but it wasn't a secret. It's just the way that it was. And so because of that, Joseph's brothers didn't like him. Okay, and you've heard the story probably. I'm not going to go into great detail. But it's interesting that there's one thing that was said in the text over and over and over again that we need to be reminded of in this current adversity that we're in right now, whether it's an adversity related to this pandemic or not, right? Whether you have family issues, business issues, leadership issues, personal vision issues, or whether those things are a result of the adversity that we're facing as a society. This phrase is true for us now, just as it was true for Joseph in his adversity. Joseph was thrown into a well by his brothers because they had said, let's kill him, right? Let's just kill him. And then one brother was like, no, let's not kill him. I mean, that's probably not a good idea. Let's toss him into this well and then forget about him. Now, in his mind, that brother was going to go back and get him, right? And so they threw him into a well, and then they saw a caravan of slave traders coming down the desert, and they said, oh, we got an idea. Let's not kill him. Let's not leave him here. Let's make some money off of him and then tell dad that he was eaten by an animal. So they took this jacket that his dad had given him. Everybody knows the coat of many colors. They dipped it in blood of a dead animal, and then they took it back to the father and said, oh my gosh, Joseph was attacked. He was killed. We're so sorry he's dead. All the while they had sold him off into slavery. So Joseph was he was taken to Egypt. He was put into slavery in the house of one of Pharaoh's assistants. And so here, let's track through the things that happened to Joseph. He was thrown into a well. He was then sold into slavery, right?
Right.
When he was sold into slavery, and this is where we see the phrase in the Bible the first time, okay? And the phrase is this: the Lord was with Joseph. And in some translations, they add the word but at the beginning of that. But the Lord was with Joseph. And I love in the English language, the word but actually means all of this stuff has happened. However, this is also true, right? But the comma and then the but is a huge English shift from one type of action to another.
There's
right?
3 words you don't want used together. I'm sorry, but.
Exactly, because it essentially means
It cancels that out.
that the sorry doesn't really matter, okay?
Right.
The but changes a lot. The B-U-T in the English language changes a ton of context. So Joseph was thrown into a well and sold into slavery, but the Lord was with Joseph.
Right.
And then it goes on to say that because the Lord was with Joseph, he was put in the second in command of this assistant leader of this country's house. Okay. Right. So peak, right? He was in a valley, literally, and then he hit a peak, as much as you can when you're a slave, I guess. But then Joseph, a strapping young man, caught the eye of his boss's wife, and his boss's wife wanted to experience some intimacy with Joseph and tried at length to get him to cave. And this is what's interesting. Joseph said, I cannot do that. It would be a sin against God and my master, right? And so he's like, no, I can't do this because I'm a person who's faithful to God, and this is wrong. But this is a man who had been thrown into a well by his family and abandoned and then sold into slavery. So he could have easily looked at that adversity and blamed God. But instead, he was honoring God through the adversity because somehow maybe there was an opportunity here. And if there wasn't, he was not going to allow the adversity to shift him off of his faith axis, right? And so, thrown in a well, sold into slavery. She couldn't get him to bed her. So when when he ran away, she grabbed his cloak. Okay, this, you can read the text. It's very entertaining. You're like, oh my gosh. And then she accused him of attempted rape.
Right.
And of course, who's going to believe the slave boy when he says, no, I didn't do that, right? So Joseph was accused of rape. There was no trial. There was no way to prove whether or not he was guilty or innocent. He's a slave boy. She's the wife of his boss. Of course he's guilty, but he wasn't. He didn't. So then he was thrown into jail. So he's thrown in a well, sold into slavery, falsely accused and convicted of rape, and then thrown into prison. And then the text says it again, but the Lord was with Joseph.
Right.
Incredible text, right? So all of these negative things are happening to him. In prison, he was so well behaved and so wise and so like put together in the midst of this adversity that the prison guard put him in charge of all the other prisoners. Just stop for a second. Can we just put ourselves in a situation where if we are thrown into a cave or a pit, okay, and then we're sold as product, then we're falsely accused and betrayed by our justice system, okay? Even if we have one, they didn't have one. It was just the way that it was. And then we're thrown into jail. I don't know many people who are going to be like, you know what? I got an opportunity to influence all these other prisoners. There's not a ton of people who are going to do that. Do you know what I'm saying? So, but the Lord was with Joseph and he became like the leader of all the other prisoners. It's like, wow, you're the most influential prisoner in this prison. And so I don't want to make the story super long. Again, please read it. It's super interesting.
But what happened when he became the leader in the jail?
Well, that's what I was going to say. There was other people that Joseph from the beginning of the story had this incredible ability to interpret dreams. Okay.
Right.
And so when he was a boy, and this was one of the things that fueled his brother's hatred towards him, is that he had dreams of like sun, moon, and stars kind of bowing down to like, or like celestial beings bowing down to a larger celestial being, and then sheaves of wheat and grain bowing down. And what he interpreted that to mean is that one day his family would bow to him as like they would be subordinates to his leadership, basically.
Right. That's what got him in trouble.
And that's what got him in trouble. And maybe he was arrogant when he shared it. Like we always give Joseph the benefit of the doubt, but maybe he was a little cocky. But the truth is that he had an ability that was given to him by God to interpret dreams. And these two dreams that he had indicated that he was going to be in leadership over his family. And they didn't like that.
I don't want to rush this part. Okay. He shared the vision.
And it made his family turn against him.
Correct. Keep that in mind.
Right.
He shared the vision, and when he shared the vision,
his brothers turned.
People turned on him.
Right. Even his father reprimanded him.
Right.
If you read the text, his father,
how dare you say,
kind of was like, no, like, what do you
right.
mean? He was still the favorite, but his dad
right.
was like, whoa, bro, what are you saying? And so he shared the vision, which anytime you share vision, there's risk, and you're always going to get, and this is what I mean when I say that leadership, anything that is worth doing requires adversity. Right? You just can't do. I got another quote from Lou Holtz, who's a sports guy, right? Like, but this quote is so true. Show me someone who has done something worthwhile, and I'll show you someone who has overcome adversity. You can't do anything worth anything without experiencing some adversity.
Right.
It has to happen.
Right.
Right. You can talk about coal being refined into diamonds because of intense pressure, or gold being purified because of intense heat. Like, you can't do something beautiful and meaningful without experiencing something potentially terrible. Like right. It's just adversity or success and even art, like creation requires adversity. It's just the way that it is.
In the ministry world, I've heard a lot of pastors say train wrecks. And one of the things that I always want to find out from a leader is, one of the first things I ask him is, what's been your train wrecks? And they look at me, sometimes they look at me weird and like, what are you talking about? And then others were like, I'll tell you, you got some time? I'll tell you about my train wreck.
I got them I got a list of them.
Right.
So we've got Joseph, who shared this vision. It kind of turned his family against him, at least his brothers. Well, slavery, accused, put in jail. But the Lord was with Joseph. Then this ability to interpret dreams came back around again.
Right.
Right. And two men in the prison. One was the cupbearer for the king, which is for Pharaoh, which is an incredibly important job.
Right.
He was basically he was one of the most trusted advisors, because he was the one who like made sure that nobody was trying to poison Pharaoh with his food. Right. So he would test it. Okay. And then a baker. right? Like just someone who worked in the kitchen, okay? And so they both had dreams. One was bad, the other was positive. Joseph interpreted it. The baker was going to get executed.
Right.
Sorry.
You're done.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they're going to put your head on a stick, okay? And that came true. Like, bummer. And so the other guy is probably like, man, oh, my dream's not like that, right? And it turned out that the cupbearer's dream was that he was going to be reinstated to his position. He would be back to all of his splendor and glory. And Joseph asked him this thing: when you're in the presence of the king, when you're in the presence of Pharaoh, don't forget me, right?
Right.
So what do you think happened? If we're following the trend of Joseph's life, of course he was forgotten about, right? Because it's years later and Pharaoh has dreams. And they're keeping him up at night. He's having these dreams. He can't figure out what they mean. And then all of a sudden the cupbearer goes, oh my gosh, I remember when I was in prison, which was a bummer of a time. Sorry about that, by the way. I had a dream and this young man interpreted it for me and it came true. He also interpreted another dream and it came true in a lesser successful way. So he's thrown in a well, sold into slavery, accused and convicted falsely of rape, thrown into prison, and then forgotten about. Right?
Right.
And so then he is faced with an opportunity when Pharaoh comes and says, he summons him, Joseph, bring the young man here. We need Joseph. So Joseph gets all done up, right? He's going to be in the presence of greatness. Okay. And he lays out what the dream is. And then I love that the text says this specifically. Joseph could have taken all of the credit for this and said, yes, I'll interpret the dream. Here's what I want in return, right? He could have done all of that. Instead, he looks at Pharaoh and he says, I can't do it. But, and then he says, but, right? It's so fascinating. But God will tell you what your dreams mean. And so here is Pharaoh, who in this time period was considered to be
a god
or an extension of the gods of the universe. And this slave boy who's been in prison and forgotten has the audacity to go, no, you're not smart enough. And neither am I, but my God is. And if I'm Pharaoh, I'm thinking the God who allowed you to be sold into slavery and forgotten about. But like, that's not what they were thinking. But you're reading the story going, there's opportunity here. And Joseph saw the opportunity, right? To honor God in the midst of adversity. He didn't know where this adversity was leading. And we talked about that when this building became available. We didn't know what we were going to face. There was just an opportunity, right? And we had a choice to make. And thankfully, in hindsight, we made the right one, but who knows how it would have turned out. But the point is that sometimes the opportunity to overcome the adversity is presented before the adversity hits. Okay. And so Joseph looks at Pharaoh and goes, I can't do it, but God will. He interprets the dream. And the dreams were essentially that there's going to be 7 really good years of crops and production and farming and all this other stuff. And then there's going to be a 7-year drought and famine. Okay. And so then Pharaoh's like, oh my gosh, like we got to figure this out. And Joseph essentially becomes the one who lays out the plan. He was put in charge to keep and put in a stockpile materials from the 7 good years, so that way they could thrive and survive during the 7 bad years.
Right. Listen, I know that we're running out of time, and I don't want you to rush the end of this.
Which we don't have to. We got some time. We're just going to keep going.
Next week you need to let's kind of cap this for right now, because I think we could spend another 20 to 30 minutes on the whole process of what we want to talk about when it comes to this. One of the things I was writing down as you were going through the story is the highs and the lows.
Right.
Okay. He had a high when his family loved him. He had a low when they didn't like him after he told the dream and the vision. He had a high when he was put into the king's house. He had a low when they was lied against and was put in jail. He had a high that came across him when he was put in leadership in jail. Which that's 20 minutes by itself. That leadership will rise no matter where you're at.
Yeah.
If you are truly letting the leadership rise.
Right.
You know, and then that was the high. So he was able to tell the dream of the cupbearer and the baker. And then the low was he was forgotten.
Right.
And then the high was that he was remembered, and the other high was that he was put in charge to prepare for a bad time.
Right.
One of the things that I want to share with the people that are listening today is understand something. This took years. This doesn't happen in a matter of about 20 minutes when you read the story. I'll give you an example. From the time that he was sold into slavery until he was moved into the king's house, just the travel time from the time they took him out of the well and he went into the city was a 30-day trip. Just that time frame alone was 30 days. And it was in the desert, and he was dragged along like any other slave person would be.
Right.
Sometimes we go through some real hard trials, and they seem like they last forever, and we're looking for an instant change that comes. And I remember these processes that we've been through. They didn't, we tell the story and it's over with in about 20 minutes. But some of these stories have went on for months.
Well,
and timetable at all. And the adversity that's there and the opportunity and the adversity, you keep saying that over and over again, is that you've got to get to the position of where in the midst when it doesn't look like you're going to come out of the valley, that maybe that's where you're going to have to live for a while. You've got to look for the opportunity in the midst of that valley. You've got to look at the process that's part of where you're at and what you're going through at that time. If not, you'll just quit and wait for the valley to come. It's through the process of the valley that the mountaintop experience comes, that the high comes. But it's the process of what you learn through that and the failures that you make in that period of time. I wonder how many times Joseph fell when he was being dragged behind the cart or the ox, when he was heading to the city, when it was a 30-day trip that he was on. I wonder how much water did he get because he was a slave. I wonder how much food he got because he was a slave. I'm sure that he wasn't treated right. He was treated as the lowest of the low. They probably kept him healthy enough to try to sell him off as what they were trying to do. But we look at these stories and we say, okay, wow, that's a neat story, high, low, high, low, high, low, and we can preach off of it. But the end result is what happened during the 30 days. And this is where I think about it all the time. What happened to the 30 days from the time that his family that had loved him rejected him? And what was the thought that he went through in the middle of the afternoon when it's 100 degrees in the desert? He has nothing to drink. He's not even sure he's going to make it till night without, dying of thirst. What was going through his mind at that time? And you can do it in all the lows. What was going through his mind when he knew that he was being lied about and he was put in jail? And all the years that he was in jail, the night after night of the darkness of the jail and the coldness of the jail. And we have to understand, it's nice for us to sit in our high moment, mountaintop moments at time and say, oh yeah, I remember the valley. But so many times we don't remember the valley. We don't remember the restless nights that we've had. And I'm sure there's some people out there that's going through what we're going through that are afraid, that are worried, that don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And they're in the midst of that night, or they're in the midst of that walking through the desert right now, not knowing what my next drink's going to be or not knowing what I'm going to eat the next time. But the end result that what I want us to remember off of today is the fact that the Lord is with you also.
Right.
God's with us in the midst of this. And when fear comes, and fear is not of God. Fear has never been of God. God is not fear. God does not bring condemnation. God brings hope. God brings peace. And in the midst of all this turmoil that the world is in, and where's our next meal coming from, or where's my next paycheck coming from, or I'm not so sure how this is going to turn out, or am I going to lose family members because of this disease that's out there, and am I making the right decisions, and I'm afraid. You have to keep in mind, you can't let fear of failure or fear direct you in what you need to do when it talks about taking the opportunity to do something in the midst of adversity.
Right.
And so as we go through the story of Joseph, there's so many times to just pause and let our minds kind of go through a process of saying, wow, what would, if I was him and I was sold from the family and I'm walking in the desert for 30 days, I don't see the king's mansion in my future. I don't see a resolve to this that's going to turn out good for me.
Well, and there's no real time frame that it says in the Bible, but many people believe that research this and study this, that it was decades from the beginning of the story to the end.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a teenager and he was a grown man when we
right.
at the point we ended the story today, when he was faced with this chance to become a leader in this idea of collecting during the 7 good years and being ready for the 7 bad years. Because the story doesn't end at the end of the 7 bad years. So there's a 14-year span that Joseph was in charge. That's after a decade plus of him being high and low, these extreme peaks and valleys. And so, but that phrasing is true, like you said, and we're going to shift gears to wrap up. But that phrase is true. But the Lord was with Joseph. That's true of us in leadership, vision, with our families, with our friends, with our businesses in the middle of this this global pandemic that we're facing. God hasn't abandoned us. He's not surprised by this.
He's not walking around in heaven, wringing his hands, trying to figure out what to do.
Scared about how to serve us and how to challenge us to serve others. And the whole point of the episode today, or what we've been talking about, is that when you are faced with adversity, I implore you, I'm like borderline begging you, please look for the opportunity, because you have no idea what kind of potential is on the other side of your choice in the midst of adversity. And we have experienced that over and over and over again.
What I've learned is that opportunity has really nothing to do with anything except for other people in these situations. And so when you look for opportunity, the first thing that I look for is, how can I have an impact on someone today? How can I bring my life into their life and have some kind of an impact, whether it's a word. I've got several people that have put prayer requests out on Facebook because of a car accident for their daughter, or a hospital visit that didn't go good, or a loved one that has died, and the pain that they're experiencing right now. That little bit of "I'm praying for you" or "How are you doing?" I watched it, and I don't want to continue, but I'm going to say this in the end. Is that a lady was getting prayers for her husband that was in the hospital with some heart condition. And the only thing that I felt like I needed to do was, how are you?
Right.
Everybody say, well, we're praying for him. We're praying that God will heal him. We're praying for him. And in the midst of 100, 150 people who were making comment, the one that hit me was, how are you doing? And she instant messaged me and said, no one's asked me that. Let me tell you where I was at. I was a mess last night. I put it in the hands of God, and peace hit me today.
Right.
And prayer's working. The guy's doing really good. She's doing good. They're being, successful. But in the midst of opportunity, always, and you might say, well, I don't have money to give, or I can't go out and do this right now. It's not about that. It's about, how can I impact someone in the midst of this chaos that's going on that maybe will bring a little bit of hope to a dark time in their life.
Right. And I want to emphasize too, if you're struggling with all this, that's fine, right?
Sure.
If you're struggling in the middle of this difficult time, we're not saying don't struggle. We're not saying that that's you. I've heard people say that if you're not getting in shape during this pandemic, then you're not doing it right. If you're not
gaining 15 pounds.
If you don't clean, if your house isn't cleaner than it's ever been during this, then you're not doing it right. And it's like, no, I don't want to clean my house. I want to sit and eat, Cheez-Its and watch Netflix, right? Like, I don't want to do anything sometimes, and that's legitimate. And so, what I do is I go get Cheez-Its and I put my sweatpants on and I watch Netflix. I watch New Girl like on a loop, right?
What's Cheez-It?
It's the cheesy crackers.
Okay.
Okay. I don't have any Cheez-Its. I have goldfish that my kids eat, and don't tell them that I've eaten some of their goldfish. Anyway, but we're working. We're trying to do what we're doing, and I get to come. The Safe House is an essential business because of its mental health, and we do get to come to work, and we get to do this kind of stuff. It's way worse for a lot of other people, and so don't hear us say like, "Oh, just get through." What we are saying though is that if we choose to, there are opportunities in the middle of any adversity.
Right.
The majority of the time, sometimes the only thing good that comes out of adversity is opportunity, is the choice to do something with it. Right. And so we're just saying, and at least I'm saying, if you're struggling with this, fine, great. Even just when you put your head on your pillow at night, I challenge you to ask yourself, what kind of opportunity do I have tomorrow?
In the midst of it.
In the middle of this. I don't have to be happy. I don't have to have it figured out. I don't have to, even get up and shave the next day. You don't have to shower in the morning. Whatever, like however you're doing this, like we're with you, right? Like that's what I want people in my circle to know is like, if you want to be angry, come be angry with me. Talk to me about it. I'm not going to tell you to, be positive. What I am going to say to people, and I've said this to people every day, we do need to look for opportunity because we do have some. And so I want you to be encouraged in the middle of all this, whether you're a parent, because if you're a parent, you're a leader because you're leading your family. If you're a business owner, you're a leader. If you have vision for your own personal life, you're a leader. You might only be leading you and a couple other people that are with you, but you're a leader. Leaders find opportunity in adversity and be challenged by that, be encouraged by that, because this is like something that we'll never, God willing, we'll never face again. So let's look at it and say, if it's true that the Lord was with Joseph, is it possible that the Lord is with me? And if he is, what could this be leading to? Right. So with that, we're going to shift gears and we're going to start to wrap up. This studio, this is the big announcement for the day. We've got kind of some other things coming down the pipeline, some opportunities for media and different sorts of like short film stuff that we're going to talk about. But this studio is going to be going away. It's going to be going bye-bye in the next couple of weeks. We are going to take that back room, that back storage garage that we used for offices back in the day, and we've got some new equipment coming, some new cameras and some sound stuff, and we're going to take this makeshift studio that we have here, and which we worked hard on. I think it's served a great purpose, and we had planned to be here for a year when we started, and things are moving really fast, and we got all kinds of stuff and opportunity. Right. And we're going to be expanding the studio. We're going to get some more guests involved and some other people. And so I think we're going to do one more podcast in this studio with this set, the way that it looks right now. And then the podcast after that, you're going to see some new stuff, and we'll take a bunch of pictures of everything and give you guys a big tour of the thing. Yeah. I said the word tour. Do I say that word right? I get made fun of. Tour. You're like tour. We went really long today. I know, but it was good. How long have we gone? We're like about an hour 16 right now. Yeah. Okay. So with that, we're going to wrap up episode 5. Thank you so much. We want you to, we're getting to a point where we're getting consistent feedback from the same people listening. Good. And that's great. Click the share button. Click the share button on Facebook. Copy the link on YouTube, post it to Twitter if you're on social media, whatever it is, like help us get the word out. Yeah. We're happy with whoever listens, but we want to take the opportunity to get more people to engage with us. And so click the share button and subscribe to it on YouTube. So safehousersd.com, safehousersd on Twitter and Instagram. And then if you search for Safehouse on Facebook, you'll find us. Bob Denon you can search for Andy Denon. And we'd love to connect with you guys. So, Dad, had a great time. Another one. Thanks again, Brandon. Appreciate it, man. Absolutely, another good one. Another good one. We'll see you guys next week. See you. Bye. Bye.